Hey guys, it's Sharon here. Before we get started on today's episode, I wanted to quickly recommend a podcast I think many of you will love. It's called Talking to Teens, Expert Tips for Parenting Teenagers. If you're finding the teen years challenging, this show brings in specialists each week to tackle everything from communication breakdowns to relationship struggles, offering practical strategies you can use immediately. They cover the same emotional terrain we explore here, just focused specifically on navigating the teenage years. Find Talking to Teens wherever you get your podcasts or at talkingtoteens.com. Okay, let's get to the show.
We need to woo the eyes out of them. We need to engage them and playfully bring about that connected use of eyes so that they can get skilled at using their eyes to read other people, to read their intentions, and to check that their own communication has been received the way they intended it.
Welcome to the ADHD Families Podcast. I'm your host, Sharon Collon, an award-winning credentialed ADHD coach and consultant and mama and wife to a very ADHD family. I am seriously obsessed with making life easier for people with ADHD and those that support them. My business, The Functional Family, provides life-changing support and strategies for ADHD. I particularly love anything that saves time, decreases conflict, and creates space for fun. Do you want a life with your beautiful family that is more functional, fun, and full of joy? Let's explore together the wonderful and sometimes wacky world of family life with ADHD in the mix. Welcome to another ADHD Families Podcast episode. I'm your host, Sharon Collon, and today we're diving into the topic that you guys have a lot of questions about, challenging behaviours. I'm thrilled to be joined by the awesome Dave Jereb, a paediatric occupational therapist with over 20 years experience and co-founder of Move About Therapy Services. Dave is the author of the bestseller Challenging the Story, a surprisingly simple approach to supporting children with challenging behaviours. As a sought-after speaker and mentor in the allied health space, Dave is passionate about supporting the people who support the kids, so helping parents, educators and therapists understand behaviour, build connection and create environments where neurodiverse kids can thrive. In today's episode, we'll explore Dave's simple approach to understanding and responding to challenging behaviours in children with ADHD. So whether you're struggling with meltdowns, defiance, emotional regulation issues, you'll walk away with practical strategies you can implement today. So let's get started. Welcome, Dave. I am so excited for our chat today.
Sharon, great to be here. Really great to chat to you.
Now, I've known you for a little while now, and I'm super impressed with the great work that you do. But before we get started with our chat on challenging behaviours, can you tell our beautiful listeners a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dave. I have a beautiful wife, Kathy, and 2 kids. And we're both occupational therapists. I love occupational therapy. I love helping families. We have 3 clinics in Sydney, Central Coast and Newcastle called Move About Therapy Services. And our organising principle is we support the people who support the kids. And so I've been working with kids for just over 30 years now. I started when I was 14 and a half, and my mum paid me $20 to volunteer for a day at a vacation care program with Bernardo's. I always say, I don't know if it counts as, does it count as volunteering if you're paid? But it was below minimum wage. And I loved it. And I've loved it ever since. And I've really loved connecting with kids, connecting with families, and just relationship is so important to me. And connection is important for everything we do. So I don't know if people know what OTs are, but OTs would work with people's occupations. I think of that as what occupies your time. So your activities are daily living. So for kids, they have work roles at school and their chores, but they have family roles as well, being part of a family, being part of a friendship group. They have to get themselves ready for school in the morning, brush their teeth, go to the toilet, all those sort of things. So OTs might help families with gross or fine motor skills. We're particularly good with kids that have sensory challenges that might over-respond, or they might seek those out. And we're really great with relationship too. And I know that you support a lot of families that have exciting people with ADHD in the family. And so that can often bring about some interesting behaviors and some exciting behaviors or some challenging behaviors. And I think we're really good at reframing those so that we can make sense of them. And then we can be able to support those families to support their kids in a way that feels both good and caring and connected, yet also effective.
Love that so much, and you are in the right place for that. So tell me, when we're narrowing in on behavior, and I guess the reason that people would tune into this podcast is to learn some tips around challenging behavior, because the other behavior we tend to support quite well.
Yeah, no one ever says we need to talk about his behavior. He's
Yes.
just been so kind and considerate and sits really still.
Yeah, we need to talk about his behavior, and he's just been amazing, and we need to talk about that. So tell me about some common misconceptions that parents might have.
That's a great question. So I don't know about you, but I had a dad who was pretty tough. And I think even Aussie society, we have this sense that to deal with behavior, you need discipline, and discipline means getting the kid to do what you want, versus discipline going, oh, we're going to think about the root origin coming from disciple. And so we're going to teach and we're going to model. But so it really needs, it's about the kid should be seen and not heard, or kid should be all these frames that are, this myth is that we have to manage behavior. And that's a big one that I want to flip the script and say, actually, development develops. We need to foster behavior. So we want to get it from the inside out. You want your child to have an internal compass of right and wrong and how best to engage with people, not be controlled from a compliance perspective, where they might, even when they do what you ask, it doesn't really set them up for the future. And I don't know about you, I slip into that compliance mode when I'm being reactive rather than proactive. I slip into my dad mode, or Mr. Smith, my 8th grade science teacher. And I come down with the, if you don't do this, you don't get this. Or if you just do this, I'll give you this. And that might get our needs met in the short term, but it doesn't set that child up for the future. And it doesn't, I guess the second myth that it doesn't account for is the fact that behavior is not just about the child. Behavior is about the child within an activity, within an environment. And so there's 3 aspects that you can tweak to impact their behavior. And hot tip, changing the child is the slowest route. Now, it might still be beneficial to help their development and help them be adaptable across a range of settings. Yes, if you can change the kid to be more adaptable, that's going to have the biggest impact, but it's slow. If you can change the activity to have the just right challenge so that they feel challenged and interested, not bored, but not stressed out that this is too hard, and that it's meaningful, includes their interest. I'm sure you have families that say, oh, they say attention, but if it's something he likes, he can pay attention. It's like, yeah, me too. I do my best to not have to pay attention to things that I find boring. As an adult, I have that choice. So that's called being human, but it's extra true for ADHD. And so you can change the activity to be more meaningful or to be the just right challenge. You can also change the environment. So we're talking sensory, physical environment. You can reduce distractions in the sensory environment. You can help them focus in on what's happening. But even more important than I think sort of people get about how they can tweak the environment. Although as an OT, I probably need to put in supportive seating is one. If the kid's swinging their legs and don't have stability, that's going to impact attention. Hot tip, dinner table that even in my household we haven't fixed. Yeah, so you need a base of support to, I go on tangents a little bit, Sharon. I hope you're okay with that. I'll come back to it.
The right place for that, Dave.
Yeah. But so dinner table's the worst for it. My household too, we still haven't fixed this out. But you want to have the ankles, knees, and hips at 90, right? Does that make sense? So you've got these L shapes that have a nice stable base of support. And so 2 feet on the ground, nice and stable. That's going to be the best to have an upright posture, to be able to use your hands for fine motor tasks, to be able to use your head and eyes in a dynamic way. You want to have stability at the base, so then you can be mobile and agile up the top. When you don't have stability at the base, it's like if you tried to have this conversation lifting your feet off the ground right now, it would be harder to even listen to me, let alone engage. And then if you wanted to write notes while you did it with your feet off the ground still, tricky, right? You have to engage that core, and then you're working in different places. So yeah, you can change the task and the environment to create a more stable base of support for the child to engage, because it's like it's like your head is a camera for your vision, and you've got a shaky tripod. If you don't have the legs adjusted just right, you're going to take a wobbly photo when you're taking a camera taking a video or a photo on a tripod. And that's the same thing. Our kids, often we're looking about attention. It's all about the chemicals in the brain, or it's about not getting enough movement, or it's about this and that. And sometimes it's just like get 2 feet on the ground and get them stable, get them interested in what's happening, make it's something that's enjoyable to them and fun, and get the challenge right. That goes a long way. The most important part of environment, though, is the social environment. Connection is the key to everything. And I don't know if we have a chance to chat about that later. That's a whole nother topic that I think we can talk about, what that does to the brain to support attention, to support behavior. Will we get to that, or should I chat about it now?
Well, I want to see, but I do think it's an important thing to bring up because we know that our kids will always do more for people that they perceive are on their team. So we talk about that in terms of teachers. If they believe that
Mm.
teacher is on their team, they have that connection piece. It's always a better year than one that they believe they keep getting stuck in a power struggle. But before we do go into that, Dave, I'd like to hear a bit more about your personal story. What
Mm.
made you do what you do? And tell me a little bit of the story behind it.
I told you my mum bribed me to go uh, hang out at a vacation care program. My sister was actually an OT as well, and I mentioned my wife's an OT, but I went along to this vacation care program, and I was a kid that really hadn't experienced kids with challenges. And this was a mix of foster kids and kids with disabilities and learning challenges, mix of ADHD and autistic kids. And there was one little guy there, let's call him Jared. He was autistic, and he just wandered the perimeter and never really dealt with people, never really tuned into people. And he really caught my eye. I was trying to figure him out. And I remember picking up a basketball and handing it to him, and he just sort of dropped it and walked off. And then I was like, huh. And I grabbed it again and I passed it to him. And this time he sort of looked at me like I was crazy and he threw it to the side. And I was like, oh. Next time I grabbed it to him, grabbed it one more time and I handed it to him. And he looked at me like he was like, what is going on here? But I was ready like a goalie then. And he threw it and I caught it and I put it back in his hand. And then I got a smirk and a little curl in the eye that said he was with me. And that's when I was hooked. That's when I knew I wanted to work with kids. And I didn't know then, but connection and relationship was going to be a key to that. And that really has been a theme as I've gone. Uh, in the OT world, I've seen that with kids with ADHD, that a lot of people are working on movement and different things. I often came back to connection because we missed that their eyes often weren't in the right place at the right time. But they're connected, right? They're like sweet kids, and we don't worry about social engagement, except that their eyes aren't in the right place at the right time. They're missing details. They're not using skilled use of eyes to read people's cues. They don't realize the teacher's irked until she's furious. They miss all right, class, quiet down, it's time to move on. And everyone else settles down and they keep going. And then like, right. And so when the finger's pointing and the volume goes up. And so there were these sort of two different types of kids that I worked with through my teenage years and into being an OT, that I was really realizing, one, there was autistic kids that weren't connected, and I was really good at connecting and helping their parents connect. And then kids with behaviors that they're not doing what we want. And our gut is to say that they're being defiant or obstinate, or that they're choosing to do that. And that just didn't sit right in my gut. That doesn't feel right. And so I was always trying to help. How can we reframe this to really understand, to move from the what of that behavior to the why of the behavior? So then we can really work with why it's happening to make it less likely to happen. And I really do believe all kids are good. All kids want to be loved and respected, and they really want to do well. It's just when there's a mismatch between that child and their environment and what they're asked to do that things go skew iffy. And so I think if we can understand that and start to sort of pull back and be a little planful in our approach, we can really help them. Uh, yeah, I mean
Um,
that's it.
can you define that, how you talked about their eyes not being in the right place at the right time? Can you break that down for us?
Sure thing. Yeah, so again, people miss this all the time with ADHD kids. They see it in autism because they're quite disconnected. There's not the gleam. Now, kids with ADHD have the gleam, right? They have the spark, they have life, but they don't use their eyes skillfully. And so in my experience, it's not all kids, but I do think this is one of the things that lets them down. And so they're just missing the subtleties of a lot of social communication. And so they misread intentions of other people from time to time. Certainly they miss things with the teachers, they miss it with their parents. They miss that build up and we rely a lot on auditory, which often is not their strong suit either. And if you give an instruction just by saying it, it sort of hovers in the air for a second or two and then it's gone. Whereas the visual is there and it can stay. And so visuals are something we don't often use a lot with, or people don't use with kids with ADHD. Again, there's these things that we think are sort of, they're for the kids with autism that really, when we go, hey, this can tell us how long we have, a timer, the red disappears, then we need to go. That's really nice and clear and concrete, and it doesn't vanish as soon as we've said that. Visuals of what the plan is, not over visualing, not using it for communication. That's not what I'm talking about, but using it just to understand, here's what the plan is so I don't have to be anxious about what's coming up. And also socially to be able to slow down and tune into who I'm talking to so that I can really understand the subtleties of what they're saying because we communicate with words, affect, and action. So that's with our body, our face, and our mouth, not just the words. That's why, like, I don't know about you, but if I try and send an email that's really important, I'm always anxious that it's going to be read wrong. And now I use Loom and I send a video to explain the email I've sent because words just don't cut it. And so if we're just relying on words for these kids who really need the visual, that's not enough. And if we're not helping them slow down and tune in with their eyes a little more, um, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to help kids tune in with their eyes a little more. The one caveat is that doesn't necessarily mean say, look at the, so when we say, look at me, the amygdala goes off. That's your fear brain, like of alarm fire. And then you don't actually tune in for the detail. We need to woo the eyes out of them. We need to engage them and playfully bring about that connected use of eyes so that they can get skilled at using their eyes to read other people, to read their intentions, and to check that their own communication has been received the way they intended it.
Love that. You just said so much gold in that. I want to jump back to something that you mentioned before. You were talking about sensory processing issues and that link to behavior. Can you tell us a little bit about that connection between sensory stuff and some of the behaviors in children with ADHD?
Yeah, definitely. Like, of course, it's a 1 or 2 day course. I do have,
Just
I have a
compress it
course.
into one answer, Dave. No.
Yep. The online course is coming, Challenging the Story of Behavior. Look out for that, and we will spend some hours on this. But yeah, so it's really simply sometimes, um, sometimes we over respond to things, sometimes we don't tune into things, sometimes we seek out things that can help our body. I wake up in the morning and I'm a bit sleepy. I'm a bit of an Eeyore to start, and I have to have a coffee and I have to have a shower in the morning. The shower is the first thing I do to wake my body up in the morning. It's not the only reason. I've been in bed. It's a good time to get clean. You're going to go out in public. But one of the reasons is it helps wake me up. I always, when I'm teaching, I say, who has a morning shower? Who has an evening shower? And it's normally 50-50. Who has both? And there's usually about 8 people that have both. And so some of those are practical reasons, but some of it is because it calms me down for bed, or some of it is because it wakes me up and gets me going in the morning. If I try and save time because I've got to get to the airport by 6:30, so I'm going to sleep in 10 more minutes and skip a shower, it takes me 20 minutes longer to get out of the house. So we use sensation to wake our body up and calm our body down. And then if I run around, what I want to tell you is when I'm in that low zone, my brain's not thinking well, language isn't happening well. So do you ever hear yourself saying things like, just don't talk to me until I've had a coffee, right? Like your brain hasn't woken up to where it can think through the language and connect the dots. I've done silly things like, I'm like, oh, I need a Berocca and I need my coffee, and I get my coffee and I get the water and I go and get the tablet for the Berocca and I put it in my coffee. And it's like, oh, right? The world's not going to end, but it just shows you my planning and thinking brain hasn't woken up enough yet. And then I get into the car and I might push on the steering wheel to stretch. I might put some loud music on. I'm cracking out AC/DC at full volume. That's great. Now I'm going, and I am a seeker. I am, dare I say, very ADHD adjacent. Um, and so I jump and crash and crawl and climb and swing for a living, and that helps me feel good. I feel alive. I feel awake. I feel alert. People say, I'd be so tired if I did your job. And I'd be like, I'd be asleep by 9:15 if I did your job sitting at a desk. I need to move, right? And I feel alive and alert. If I have stressful day, and it's the end of the day, and I go out to the car and lights are flickering, and I'm sort of a little bit edgy and I'm getting a bit high. And I get in my car and I turn on the ignition, and what happens? I'm blasted with ACDC at full volume. I almost said I'm blasted with ADHD at full volume. ACDC at full volume, I might panic and turn the ignition off, right? Problem solved. Well, not quite. In my car, you can't turn the volume down when the ignition's off, so I'm going to have to get blasted again. But what I'm telling you that because when you're in the high zone, you're also not thinking and reasoning well. It was about get safe and deal with the problem. Also, wouldn't be good for language. Not a good time for my wife to say, "Let's talk about the budget." I'd be like, "Can't do it." Right, but I can make a quick plan. I maybe have a breath, push on the steering wheel to feel a bit grounded again, and then I quick plan, turn it on, turn it off. And I do that, and I'm able to turn the volume down, even though I got a bit blasted. Crisis averted. I can calm down and go to bed in the evening. Now, I have a fairly broad. I am a bit skewed towards a sensory seeker, ADHD kind of model, but I can recover pretty quickly. A couple of things I wanted you to get out of that is when you're in this low zone, your brain's not awake enough to be able to think and reason and to access language. When you're in the high zone and you're a bit overexcited or agitated or stressed, it's also not good for thinking and reasoning and using language. And so what we often see is and that's when challenges in behaviors often happen. We would call that dysregulation. Even the under, you're not regulated. There's nice broad optimal range of regulation that you can think and reason and work within. What we see in ADHD is firstly, I wouldn't say an expert in ADHD, but I've worked with a lot of kids here. And I think there's a range of different kids that get this label that might have different features and aspects. I'm not someone that says never do meds. I'm not someone that says always do meds. I'm not someone that says here's what you need to do. I think there's a lot of value in thinking about sensation and how we use our body to wake our body up and calm our body down. I think nutrition is really valuable and vitamins. I think sleep's really important, routine, a whole bunch of different things. And there are some kids that need that extra little bit of support. So there's no judgment on any of that. I do think that we can wake our body up and calm our body down. Now, I sort of say I'm a bit of an Eeyore in the morning. That was a way of sort of explaining that low zone. What I want to say is Eeyore has a big low zone, but here's the deal. There's a type of Tigger that also has a big low zone, right? And that's probably a lot of our ADHD kids. And you think, how is that possible? That in terms of, we're talking about how alert the brain is, they call it arousal. How could it be that Eeyore and Tigger have the same? Well, Eeyore just plods along and gives into it. Maybe he's an ADD kind of kid. He gets called lazy or lethargic or a plodder. He usually doesn't get into that much trouble because he doesn't bug anyone else, doesn't learn much. But we still want to help him wake his brain up to where he can think and reason and be successful. The Tigger that's bouncing off the walls gets help because he's making everyone's life crazy, or his body is. But so how does he have the same big low zone? Well, instead of just giving into it like Eeyore, Tigger seeks and seeks and seeks and seeks and seeks to try and wake his body up. So he's touching everything and putting things in his mouth and constantly moving and talking to fill the space. And that helps him feel awake and alert. And I mean, you're getting pretty much a live demonstration of it here as I speak, particularly if you're on the YouTube channel looking at this. But so what we want to do is that's clues. He's trying to calm his body up or her body up. And so, hot tip, if that's the case, you don't want to calm them down. You want to calm them up, right? So
Narrowing on that for me.
Yeah. So calming up is about they're in the low zone, and so they're doing what they can to try and wake their body up. Now, they might not be choosing the best responses, but their bodies are giving you clues. So if they're constantly moving, I'd be thinking their body thinks movement's going to be helpful, but we need to give more organized movement. So when I say organized movement, I think if we can get it in a straight line and with some rhythm. So if it could be like bouncing on a gym ball is something OTs often get kids to do. I'm well aware that if we don't set the expectations up front, that could end up in tragedy. We can chat about that if we have time. But up and down, if we can get sort of rhythmic movement, rhythm is key. 50 to 70 beats per minute, probably around the 60 is awake and alert and attentive. So activities that have a bit of beat to it, music that has a bit of a steady rhythm to it can be incredibly organizing for the nervous system. So movement, I would like to have clear plan of action. So we're going to do this activity that's 10 jumps here, and then we're going to go there and going to go back. Or, it could be a bit of TheraBand under their chair that they can just kick rhythmically. It could be sitting on a gym ball if we've given the expectations that, hey, this is to help you in class to listen. This is a listening ball. If it helps you listen and it stays under your butt and doesn't go anywhere else and it's used for little bounces, not big bounces, then we can use it. If it doesn't, then we'll have to put it away and we'll try something else. So the expectations are kind of key, but up and down, back and forwards, clear, more linear than irregular crash and bump crazy, and rhythmic are really the keys for that movement piece. Uh, so anyway, waking their body up. Breath is also a really powerful organizer. Using your muscles is a really powerful organizer. So push, pull, hanging, weight bearing, these sort of things, particularly at midline, particularly balanced. Alignment is really key. This is where an OT helps you get some of the, there's people say, oh, you just got to do wall push-ups and you just got to do wheelbarrow walks. It's a little bit more complex than that. You want to have really nice, balanced posture. You want to be centered, grounded. Basically, if the movement looks good, it's probably going to be good. If it looks crappy, like if they're doing funny positions, I normally use a worse swear word, but I know we're on a family podcast. If they're doing like awkward positions to do this push a war or pull a war and they're tightening up and they're squiggly and squirmy, that's not what we're looking. That's not organizing. If they look nice and stable and in a straight, like both sides are balanced, they've got a little tuck like you might see in an Ironman competition, that's going to be good, clear information. Organizing input is organizing for the body. And so, yeah, if it looks like rubbish, the input's probably not that good, even though someone said using your muscles is good. And breath. Breath is powerful, really powerful. That's the center of your body. So it is very centering as well. There is another type of seeker, though. Can I tell you about that?
Yes, please.
Or, yeah, the other type of seeker that we never talk about, and actually a lot of OTs don't talk about, is we always talk about this waking the brain up. And actually, for kids with ADHD, I often, with that one, always make the connection of why do we often give these guys stimulants, right? If they're bouncing off the walls, why do we stimulate them? And some of it is to wake their brain up to a place where they can get that optimal range and pay attention. But there is another group of kids that are bouncing off the walls because they're actually trying to calm their nervous system down. So they might be what we call sensory defensive. Maybe they react to tags on their shirts or seams in their socks or certain noises. And so there's different things that might be setting them off. Maybe they just can't organize the space. And so taking in sights and sounds and all these things in a busy classroom, these open plan classrooms are not always the best for our kids, right? Because there's lots happening and just organizing that stress on the body. And so sometimes we seek to try and calm our bodies down. I frequently see kids that are like sensitive to sound, sensitive to touch, but throw their bodies around and really seek big squeezy hugs. And so it could be that they're waking their body up. It could be that they're calming their body down and they're doing it through movement or touch or seeking that input to feel more centered. That's really the key. They want to feel more centered. And so in a sense, you can hypothesize which it is, but the cheat code is breath is going to be powerful no matter what. Using your muscles in alignment where two sides of that piece I was talking about before, where they're balanced and it looks good, and rhythm, movement with rhythm is often tends to be organizing and centering as well. So it sort of is a cheat code that if you're using those things, they'll tend to bring you up if you're down and down if you're up. And so that's a pretty cool cheat code. But if you can
And,
work out, are they trying to wake up or calm down? That's a good thing to know.
and I love how you bottom line that, Dave. Thank you, because that's really helpful. Now, this is where parents get tripped up, right? Because we get ADHD is so situational and variable. And we kind of hear this language about sensory seekers, sensory avoider. I love how you describe that sensory defender then. Was it defender?
Yeah, sensory
Um,
defensive, yeah, or
yeah, defensive.
reactive.
Okay. And so we kind of get the idea that they're one or the other. Like, one, like they can only
Mhm.
be one, but that's just not true at any given time. We can swap between. It's just that we're sensorily sensitive. Is that how you would describe it?
I mean, I think people do often, you don't tend to go from being auditorily defensive to under responding. Although, in saying that, though, some kids are stressed out because they can't make sense of it.
Mm.
And so they sort of perk up and meerkat. They hear a sound and you're like, what stressed you out? And you're like, oh, that's Jeremy in the other room. And so we go and have a look, and then they're fine from that point onwards. Making sense of sound can be a piece. But it, it, we all have sensory profiles. Like we all have our different patterns of how we respond to things. And maybe we're a bit more of an E or a bit more of a Tigger or a bit whatever the different box we land in. But yeah, it can be different in each senses. It's different from person to person. It can be different in different senses. It can accumulate across a day and even across a week to some degree. It often relies on how you slept the night before. You don't tend to switch within that too much,
Mhm.
but you certainly can be. Like I have work shirts that I've been wearing for 17 years since we opened Move About, and they have a tag in it, except for three of them. Three out of the sort of 20 workshops shirts I've had in that time don't have tags because I reached a level of sensitivity on my drive home on a hot summer's day where I was irritated and I could not block out the feel of that tag. So I've ripped it out. Like three out of 20 odd shirts in 17 years. It took me to get to that stage to do that, whereas some of our kids like are reacting to that a little earlier. To get back the way you originally phrased it, it doesn't mean that that's the way you respond across all of your senses. Like I said, there are kids that are reactive to sound and light touch, but then they seek out a lot of deep touch and they seek out a lot of movement, and maybe they make their own noises to block out the sounds they don't like. Kids that sort of hum or mumble or talk to fill the space. So some of that is also about planning. Sometimes we have kids that control the conversation, control the game, so that they set the rules and they understand what's happening. Whereas if they have to listen to what's happening, that can be a bit more challenging and to fit themselves in other people's plans. So some of it is about waking your body up and calming your body down, and it's different in each senses. And then you also need to plan within an environment that can stress you out if you don't know what the plan is. So you might control it as well. I mean, there's a range of different things.
So tell me, what are some practical strategies for parents at home that we can do to support our kids with some of the behaviors that we might perceive as more challenging before they occur?
Yeah, I think that's great. The idea of before they occur. Firstly, connection is the key. When we connect with kids, we provide an anchor for them so we can co-regulate with them. So we give them that sort of grounded anchor to refer to, and connecting is sometimes a family say, I just don't have the time to do all this extra stuff that OTs are asking me to do. And it's like, I've set a goal in my household to connect with my kids for 5 or 10 seconds as I say goodbye, right? And like that feels like such a low bar. Sometimes I'm embarrassed to say it, but it is hard to get into a rhythm of doing this stuff. But what I see is I get down level, I'm like, hey, buddy, have a great day at school today. Yeah, Dad. I'm like, hey, buddy, have a great day at school. And they look up and they gush, right? And when that happens, it makes me almost a little teary talking about it. Like they gush, right? And you need to linger long enough that it would be weird if you did it on the street. It would probably even be weird if you and I did it that way. We should do it with people. We should, tune into people a little more than we do. But with your kids, that you want that level of intimacy that would be weird if you did it with the postman, right? That sets the brain and really pours oxytocin in it that calms down the amygdala, the fear brain, that calms down the stress pathways. It really is quite organizing for the brain. If you can do it for 5 minutes, you can change the way the brain is working. They've got research where they've had a more disorganized brain and a more connected brain, a more organized brain. Have you seen those flowy blob studies where the blobs flow up and down and left, right? We want a whole brain, right? That's connecting left, right, top, bottom, front, back. And those flowy blobs, fMRIs, I think they're called, like that's a nice, awake, alert, connected, organized brain. But what we end up seeing is these pockety brains that are lighting up. You've probably seen that too. And maybe there's little highways between certain things, but they're not flowy blobs. 5 minutes of an organized brain connecting with a less organized brain, and you get flowy blobs in both. I think that's pretty amazing to say, if I could connect for 5 minutes before something that's going to be challenging or like to start the day, if I could get nothing more than that, I would be incredibly grateful. OTs often also talk about sensory diet is really great. If you could give some of that organizing input I talked about to set the body up, using the muscles in alignment, so around the middle, pushing and pulling at the center, keeping it balanced, maybe some rhythmic movement and some breath, 10 minutes of that could really set you up for the next couple of hours as well. So they're a really great start for the day. And then I guess when we're talking about behavior in general, I think just really peeling it back to try and figure out, all right, that's the what, and it's driving me crazy, or it's interfering their ability to do their schoolwork or have friends. That's the what. Let me just take a breath and peel it back and sort of figure out, why is that happening? Did something lead up to it? Does something actually help, does it help them achieve something else? Is it something I know about their individual differences, or where they are developmentally? Is that why it's happening? Or is it something to do with the activity that's not a right fit for them? It's not interesting for them? Is it about the environment has all these different distractions and things happening? Or is it something in the relationship? I've just sort of gone through the letters that make up a framework that I've come up with, which is called the ABC ideas. And so I have a tool that, like a checklist, and you can find that. I think I have it linked to my LinkedIn page. But yeah, so it's antecedent behavior, consequence. Behaviors, what's the objective behavior? Antecedent, so what are the things that come before it? Consequence is what typically happens after it. So not how do you punish them, but what typically happens after it. If you're reading in class, the teacher says you have to read in class, you don't feel good about reading, and so you go blah blah blah, and the teacher sends you out. Well, you avoided showing your friends that you struggle with reading, right? So today's consequence can be tomorrow's antecedent. Doesn't mean that you stop teaching them reading, but maybe you don't ask them to do it in class. Might be a way to reduce that behavior rather than sending them out. Individual differences are things you need to work through to know where are they in relation to others. We want to have your child plan, not a one size fits all, where they are developmentally. And we talked about environment and activities and relationship as well. But that's a planful way to be able to approach it. Now that's a lot to think about. I do think when you've got a big thing coming up, a big challenge at school that they're calling meetings about, or something that's driving you crazy at home, it is worth working through those letters and just saying, how do I move from the what to the why of this behavior, so that I can support them to not need that behavior to feel okay in that situation? Um, and the more you use it, the more you just do it naturally and you start to tune in with it. Connection is the key, though. If you can't think about any of those things, in any moment, if you can get connection, you can set the brain to be more open, or to be more regulated, and to be more open to learning.
I love that how you set that out too, because from an ADHD coaching perspective, we actually look at what works, where they shine, and see if we can pull that across to areas that they struggle, right? Like it's
Mm.
one of our strategies for ADHD coaching is we look at what their strengths are and what works, and then see if we can pull it across. And you could almost flip that, what the behavior is and what the consequence is, into analyzing what works as well. Like
Mm.
what is it that allows that child to shine in that instance? Where does that come from, and what can we do to support them with that in other things too?
100,000%. It's a quick podcast, but yeah, I absolutely, starting with bright spots is amazing. When isn't this behavior happening? What are the qualities of that environment, that activity, that relationship that fits their body and their developmental abilities and their individual differences? What are the qualities of that interaction that made it successful, so that we can learn from those bright spots to use in those trickier times? Absolutely. And and how can we use their strengths? I really don't do a lot of things that I feel crappy in my adult life. I'm an OT because I'm a damn good OT. I work with families because I love relationships. I love connection. I love supporting the people who support the kids. I love kids. Kids are hilarious, right? I do things that I'm good at. I don't play in a competitive basketball league because I'm 5'4", right? And probably shrinking as we speak now that I'm in my late 40s. So like I don't do things that I don't focus on my deficits very much at all. I have the choice to. Our kids don't necessarily have that choice in school. What I will, I'm on a bit of a tangent here, but what I do want to say is that, these kids get called disruptors. Here's the deal. When you get into the adult world, the grown-up world, being a disruptor is a real sign of pride, particularly in the entrepreneurial space. And you know what? In this AI world, being able to remember stuff, like memorizing, so not needed. Thinking creatively, thinking outside of the box, disrupting the way we think about things to come up with new innovative ways. Like ADHD kids are going to be our leaders in the future. Now, do they have some challenges along that way to get there? Yeah. But if we can get through the crummy school system and get to that place where they can shine, follow their passions, follow what's meaningful, and think outside the box, man, they're the ones that can make the world a better place. That sounds so cheesy, but it's true.
True. And Dave, you've shared so much gold with us in this podcast today. So I want to thank you so much for your time. Before we go, can you tell us a little bit about where to find you?
Yeah, so if you're in the Sydney Central Coast, Newcastle area, we have our OT clinics, Move About Therapy Services, and you can find that at moveabout.com.au. Add a / courses, and you can see where we start to have some webinars, online courses. There's a place there to join the waiting list for the Challenging the Story of Behaviour workshop. So that's moveabout.com.au / courses. I'm also Dave Jereb _OT on Instagram, and I'm Dave Jereb on LinkedIn as well.
I'm going to put all those links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for your time and wisdom today, Dave.
It was honestly my pleasure, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the ADHD Families Podcast. If you loved it, please share it on your socials. I want this to start a conversation about ADHD. If you want to make this mum do a little happy dance, please leave a review on iTunes. If you would like to know more about what we do, check out thefunctionalfamily.com. I truly hope that you enjoyed this podcast and you use it to create a wonderful, effective, joyful life with your beautiful children.